Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he gripped the alien weapon in his hands. The metal felt cold and wrong against his skin. Around him, other young humans struggled with the same strange guns that seemed too heavy and awkward for human hands. The training ground was a massive concrete space with targets at different distances. Alien symbols covered the walls, glowing with a blue light that hurt Jake's eyes. The air smelled like metal and something else he could not name. It made his nose burn. Fire at the targets. Commander Zektar shouted. The reptilian alien stood. 8 feet tall with green scales that caught the light. His yellow eyes watched every move the human recruits made. His voice was like gravel in a bucket. Jake raised his weapon and aimed at the closest target. He pulled the trigger, and nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. His face turned red as other humans around him had the same problem. Lisa Carter, who stood next to Jake, finally got her weapon to work. A bright beam shot out and hit the ground 3 feet from her target. She looked at Jake and shook her head. "Things are made for aliens, not us," she whispered. Commander Zektar walked over to Jake with slow, heavy steps. Each footstep echoed in the large room. "Human Morrison," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Why are you not firing?" Jake looked up at the alien commander. "Sir, I think there's something wrong with my weapon." Zektar grabbed the weapon from Jake's hands. With one quick motion, he pointed it at a target and fired. The beam hit the center. "Perfectly, the weapon works fine. You are the problem." Jake felt his cheeks burn with shame. "Sir, my grandfather always said that a good soldier adapts to any weapon. Maybe I just need more practice." The alien commander's eyes narrowed. "But your grandfather? What would a human know about being a soldier?" "He trained soldiers, sir. Elite soldiers back on Earth. He said that the best fighters learn to use any weapon, even ones made for different hands." A strange silence fell over the training ground. Other alien recruits from different planets stopped what they were doing to listen. Some of them made sounds that might have been laughter. Commander Zektar's scaled face changed color, becoming darker. "Your grandfather trained elite soldiers?" His voice was very quiet now, which somehow made it more frightening. "Yes, sir. He was in special operations. He trained the best of the best." The alien commander stepped closer to Jake. "You think your primitive planet produces elite soldiers? You think humans who only learned to travel between stars 50 years ago know about warfare?" Jake's heart beat faster, but he stood straight. "I know what my grandfather told me, sir. Your grandfather was likely training children with wooden sticks while the Emperor's forces conquered entire star systems," Zektar said. His voice grew louder with each word. "Your species is new to the galaxy. You know nothing of real warfare." Some of the alien recruits made more laughing sounds. A few humans looked down at their feet, embarrassed. But Lisa and a few others watched Jake with worried eyes. "Sir, I was just saying that he taught me that any soldier can learn to use any weapon, if they try hard enough." Commander Zektar raised his scaled hand high in the air. "You dare to compare human training to the Emperor's military?" The hand came down fast and hard across Jake's face. The sound echoed through the training ground like a gunshot. "At!" Jake stumbled backwards, his cheek burning with pain. He could taste blood in his mouth. "That is what happens when humans think they are warriors," Zektar said to all the recruits. "Your species is weak. Your planet was conquered easily when we arrived. Your best soldiers could not stop a single squad of our troops." Jake touched his cheek and felt it swelling. His eye was starting to close, but he did not cry. His grandfather had taught him that soldiers do not cry even when they are hurt. "Get back in line," Zektar ordered. "All of you will train until you can hit the targets. The humans will train twice as long since they are twice as slow to learn." As Jake picked up his weapon again, he heard some of the human recruits whispering. Behind him, "Why'd you have to say that about your grandfather?" one of them asked. "Now we all have to train longer." "Jake always makes up stories," another said. "His grandfather probably fixed cars or something normal." But Lisa moved closer to Jake. "I believe you," she said quietly. "My dad always said there were things about Earth's military that we were not told." Jake looked at her with his good eye. "Thanks, but But maybe they are right. Maybe I was just making it up. No, Lisa said. You talk about your grandfather differently than people talk about made-up things. You talk about him like he was real and important. The training continued for 3 more hours. Jake's face hurt more and more, but he kept trying to make the alien weapon work. By the end, he could hit the target sometimes, but not as well as the alien recruits. When training ended, all the recruits walked back to their sleeping quarters. The human area was separate from the aliens. It was smaller and had older equipment. Jake lay on his narrow bed and looked at the ceiling. His face throbbed with pain. He wondered if his grandfather really had been a special soldier, or if he had just been a regular person who told good stories to a young boy. In his pocket he had an old photo of his grandfather with other soldiers. All looked serious and strong. But maybe Lisa was wrong. Maybe it was just a normal picture of normal soldiers. As Jake fell asleep, he could still hear Commander Zektar's words about humans being weak and primitive. Tomorrow would bring more training, more alien weapons, and more chances to prove that humans could be soldiers too. But tonight, his face hurt, and he felt very far from home. 3 days after Jake got hit, new people arrived at the training academy. Jake watched from the window of his sleeping room as a transport ship landed on the metal platform outside. His face still hurt, and his left eye was purple and black. "Recruits?" Lisa asked, standing next to him. "No," Jake said. "Look at their clothes. They are wearing work uniforms, not recruit uniforms." A group of people walked off the ship carrying toolboxes and equipment. Most of them were aliens Jake had never seen before. 3 of them were human. One was a woman with short brown hair. Another was a young man about 20 years old. The third was an older man with gray hair and a beard. The older man moved differently than the others. While the other workers looked around nervously at the alien guards, the older man walked like he belonged there. His eyes moved slowly across the training ground, taking in everything but not looking worried. "That old guy looks tough, Lisa," said Jake, nodded. Something about the man reminded him of his grandfather, though he could not say what it was. Later that day, during combat training, Jake's face started bleeding again. Alien weapon was still too heavy for him, and when he tried to hold it steady, pain shot through his injured cheek. Commander Zektar saw the blood and smiled with his sharp teeth. "The human is still bleeding from his lesson," he told the other recruits. Perhaps he learned that humans should not pretend to be warriors. Jake wiped the blood away and kept training. But by the end of the day, his face was swollen again, and the cut had gotten worse. That night, Jake sat alone in the eating area, picking at his food. The academy food was made for alien stomachs and always made him feel sick. His face hurt too much to chew properly. "That looks painful," a voice said behind him. Jake turned around and saw the older human man from the maintenance crew. Up close, the man looked to be about 60 years old. His hands were rough and marked with old scars. His eyes were blue and steady. "It's fine," Jake said. "Just part of training." The man sat down across from Jake without being invited. "Pete Sullivan," he said, holding out his hand. "Jake Morrison." They shook hands. Pete's grip was firm and strong. "Morrison," Pete said slowly, like he was thinking about the name. "Where are you from, Jake?" "New Dallas Colony. My family moved there when I was little." Pete nodded, "And before that, Earth. My grandfather lived there until he died." Pete was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his tool bag and pulled out a small metal container. "This will help with the infection," he said, setting it on the table. Jake looked at the container. "What infection?" "The one starting in that cut on your face. Alien bacteria. Human skin doesn't handle it well without treatment." Jake picked up the container. It was some kind of medical cream. "How do you know about alien bacteria?" Pete stood up. "I've been around," he said. "Use that cream twice a day." And Jake, "Next time someone hits you, turn your head more to the side. It spreads the impact and reduces the damage." Before Jake could ask what he meant, Pete walked away. Jake used the cream that night. By morning, his face felt much better. The swelling went down, and the pain was almost gone. He wondered how a Mechanic knew so much about treating injuries from alien bacteria. During training the next day, Jake noticed that Pete was working on equipment near the training ground. The older man never looked directly at the recruits, but Jake could tell he was watching when Commander Zektar shouted at the human recruits. Pete's hands would stop moving for just a second. When Jake struggled with the alien weapon, Pete would glance over without turning his head. After training, Jake found Pete working on a broken target machine. "Thank you for the medicine," Jake said. Pete looked up from his work. "How's the face?" "Much better." "Where did you learn about alien bacteria?" Pete went back to his work. "You pick things up when you work around different species?" Jake watched Pete work. The older man's hands moved with sure, quick motions. He seemed to know exactly what each part of the machine did without looking at any instruction manual. "Have you been a mechanic for a long time?" Jake asked. "Long enough," Pete said. He finished with the machine and stood up. "Jake, can I ask you something? What did your grandfather do before he died?" Jake was surprised by the question. "He was a soldier. Special operations," he said. "What?" "But everyone here thinks I made that up." Pete's expression did not change, but something in his eyes seemed different. "What was your grandfather's name?" "Frank Morrison. Sergeant Frank Morrison." Pete was very still for a moment. Then he picked up his tools. "Get some rest, Jake. Tomorrow's training will be harder." As Pete walked away, Jake noticed something he had missed before. The older man walked very quietly, even on the metal floor. His steps made almost no sound. Jake had only seen one other person walk that quietly, his grandfather. That night, Jake lay in his bed, thinking about Pete. The man knew too much about medical treatment. He moved too quietly. He watched the training, too carefully for someone who was just fixing machines. Jake pulled out the old photo of his grandfather and the other soldiers. In the dim light of his room, he studied their faces. They all had the same look in their eyes that he had seen in Pete's eyes, alert and careful, but not afraid. Jake wondered if Pete had been more than just a mechanic before he came to the academy. He wondered if Pete knew more about soldiers than he was saying. As Jake fell asleep, he thought about the way Pete had told him to turn his head when someone hit him. That was not something a mechanic would know. That was something a fighter would know. Maybe Jake was not the only one at the academy who was more than he seemed. 2 weeks after Pete arrived, Jake had his worst training day yet. Commander Zektar made all the human recruits run for 2 hours in the hot sun. Then they had to practice hand-to-hand combat with alien partners who were twice their size. Jake's partner was a large blue alien with 4 arms. Every time Jake tried to attack, the alien grabbed him with 2 arms and threw him to the ground with the other 2. By the end of training, Jake could barely stand up. "Humans are so weak," the blue alien said, looking down at Jake. "My planet children fight better than this." Jake tried to get up, but his legs would not work. His whole body hurt and he felt dizzy. The other human recruits were in the same condition. Lying on the ground and breathing hard, Commander Zektar walked over to Jake. "Still think your grandfather trained elite soldiers?" he asked. "Elite soldiers do not lie on the ground like dead fish." Jake could not answer. He was too tired and hurt to speak. "Get up," Zektar ordered. "Training is not over." Jake tried to push himself up, but fell back down. His arms shook from effort. "I said, get up!" Zektar shouted. Jake tried again, but could not do it. He felt ashamed and angry at himself. Maybe Commander Zektar was right. Maybe humans were just too weak to be real soldiers. "Pathetic," Zektar said. "All humans are pathetic." That night, Jake did not go to the eating area with the other recruits. Instead, he went to the maintenance bay where he was supposed to clean equipment as punishment for failing training. His punishment was to clean alien weapons until they shined. The maintenance bay was quiet and dark. Jake sat on the floor next to a pile of weapons and started cleaning them one by one. His hands still shook from exhaustion. "Rough day?" Pete's voice came from the shadows. Jake looked up and saw Pete working on a machine in the corner. He had not seen the older man when he came in. "Yeah," Jake said. "Really rough." Pete put down his tools and walked over. He looked like someone who got beaten up by a 4-armed Zelkarian. Jake was surprised. "How did you know? I saw the training from the window." Those aliens are strong, but they fight in predictable ways. Pete sat down on a box next to Jake. Your grandfather ever teach you about fighting different species? Jake stopped cleaning the weapon in his hands. My grandfather is dead, and maybe he was not the soldier I thought he was. Pete was quiet for a moment. Why do you say that? Because I'm weak. If he really trained elite soldiers, then his grandson should be stronger. But I can't even stand up to aliens that everyone else in the galaxy can fight. Pete reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal flask. He took a sip and offered it to Jake. What did your grandfather tell you about being a soldier? Jake took a small sip from the flask. It burned his throat, but made him feel a little better. He said that being a soldier was not about being the strongest or the fastest. He said it was about thinking and adapting and never giving up. Sounds like he knew what he was talking about. Jake looked at Pete. But I did give up today. I could not get up when Commander Zekdar told me to, because you were exhausted, not because you gave up. There's a difference. Pete took the flask back. Tell me more about your grandfather. What was his name again? Frank Morrison. He died when I was 10, but before that he told me stories about his time in the military. Pete's face changed when Jake said the name. His eyes got very focused, and he leaned forward. Frank Morrison. You sure that was his name? Of course I'm sure. He was my grandfather. Pete was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Jake, do you have any pictures of your grandfather? Jake pulled out the old photo he always carried. It showed his grandfather with 5 other soldiers, all wearing dark uniforms that Jake did not recognize. They were standing in front of some kind of spacecraft. Pete took the photo and looked at it carefully. His hands were very still as he studied each face. After a long time, he pointed to one of the soldiers standing next to Jake's grandfather. That's me, Pete said quietly. Jake stared at him. What? That's me, 40 years ago. I served with your grandfather in a unit called the Horizon Guard. Jake felt like the world was spinning. That's impossible. You're just a mechanic. Pete handed the photo back to Jake. Your grandfather was not just any soldier, Jake. He was part of something very special and very secret. What do you mean? Pete looked around to make sure they were alone. Then he spoke very quietly. Before humans made official contact with the galactic community, we knew about aliens. We'd been watching them for decades. Sometimes their ships crashed on Earth. Sometimes we intercepted their communications. Jake listened with his mouth open. The government created a special military unit to prepare for the day when humans would join the galactic community. Studied alien technology, alien fighting styles, alien psychology. We prepared for the possibility that not all alien species would be friendly. The Horizon Guard, Jake said. Yes. Your grandfather was one of the best soldiers I ever served. He could adapt to any situation, use any weapon, fight any enemy. He trained hundreds of soldiers in techniques that combined human tactics with alien technology. Jake looked at the photo again. So when I said he trained elite soldiers, we're telling the truth. Frank Morrison trained some of the most elite soldiers in human history. Soldiers who were ready to fight aliens before most humans even knew aliens existed. Jake felt tears in his eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pride and relief. So I was not making it up. No, Jake, you were not making it up. Your grandfather was a hero. and everything he told you about being a soldier was true. Pete stood up and helped Jake to his feet. Frank Morrison's grandson is not weak. You just need to learn the techniques your grandfather would have taught you if he had lived longer. Jake wiped his eyes and stood straighter. Will you teach me? Pete smiled for the first time since Jake had met him. I think Frank would want me to, but first finish cleaning those weapons. A good soldier always completes his duties. As Jake went back to cleaning, he felt different. The weapons in his hands did not seem so heavy anymore. His body still hurt from training, but now he knew that pain was just part of becoming stronger. His grandfather had not just been telling stories. Frank Morrison really had been an elite soldier, and Jake carried that legacy in his blood. The next evening, Jake was practicing weapon handling with Pete in the maintenance bay. Pete was showing him how to hold the alien rifle, so it would not hurt his shoulders when he fired it. Keep your feet wider apart, Pete said.
The weapon.
Kicks to the right because it was made for aliens with different arms than humans. Jake adjusted his stance and fired at a target Pete had set up. The beam hit much closer to the center than ever before. Better, Pete said. Your grandfather would be proud. Just then, the door to the maintenance bay opened with a loud crash. Commander Zektar stood in the doorway with 2 other alien guards behind him. His yellow eyes were angry, and his scales looked darker than usual. What is happening here? Zektar demanded. Jake quickly put down the weapon. Sir, I was just cleaning. Equipment. Zektar walked into the room slowly, looking at Pete and Jake. I heard voices. I heard talk about training and weapons. Pete stepped forward calmly. The commander. I was just helping the recruit understand how to properly maintain the training equipment. You are a mechanic, Zektar said. You fix machines. You do not train recruits. That's correct, sir, Pete said. But Zektar was not satisfied. He walked closer to Pete. Heard something else. Heard you talking about this human's grandfather. I heard you say his grandfather would be proud. Jake felt his heart beating fast. If Commander Zektar found out about the Horizon Guard, Pete could get in serious trouble. The boy was telling me about his family, Pete said. I was just being polite. Zektar's eyes narrowed. You humans are all liars. First, this recruit claims his grandfather trained elite soldiers. How you pretend to know about military training. Pete did not change his expression. I don't know what you mean, Commander. I think you do, Zektar said. He pointed at Jake. This human has been performing better in training lately. Someone has been helping him. Jake wanted to say something, but Pete gave him a small look that meant to stay quiet. Commander Zektar walked around Pete in a circle, studying him. You move like someone with military training. You watch our training sessions when you think no one is looking. Too much about weapons for a simple mechanic? Pete remained calm. I've worked around military equipment for many years. You pick things up. Prove it, Zektar said suddenly. Excuse me, if you are just a mechanic, then prove it. Show me that you know nothing about real military training. Zektar smiled with his sharp teeth. I challenge you to a demonstration. Pete looked at the alien commander for a long moment. What kind of demonstration? Combat training, weapon handling, tactical planning. All the things you claim to know nothing about? Zektar's voice got louder. If you are just a mechanic, you will fail badly. If you have been lying about who you are, then we will all see the truth. Jake felt scared for Pete. Commander Zektar was a trained military officer. He was bigger and stronger than any human. The weapons and tests were all designed for aliens. And if I refuse, Pete asked, then I will assume you are a spy or saboteur, and you will be arrested. Pete was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. When do you want to do this demonstration? Now, in front of all the recruits and instructors. Let everyone see what happens when a human mechanic tries to be a soldier. 20 minutes later, every recruit and instructor at the academy was gathered in the main training ground. Word had spread quickly that the human mechanic was going to be tested by Commander Zektar himself. Jake stood with Lisa and the other human recruits. They all looked worried. The alien recruits looked excited. It's like they were about to watch a good show. Commander Zektar stood in the center of the training ground wearing his full combat armor. Pete stood across from him wearing his simple work clothes. Next to them was a table full of different alien weapons and equipment. First test, Zektar announced to the crowd. Weapon assembly and targeting. He pointed to a complex alien rifle that Jake had never seen before. Assemble this weapon from its parts and hit 5 targets in 30 seconds. Jake held his breath as Pete walked to the table. The alien rifle was in dozens of pieces. Most recruits needed hours just to learn how to put together the simple training weapons. Pete looked at the pieces for 3 seconds. Then his hands started moving. Jake could barely follow what Pete was doing. The older man's fingers moved over the weapon parts like he had assembled this exact rifle 1,000 times before. In 15 seconds, the weapon was complete. Pete raised it and fired 5 quick shots. All 5 targets exploded in perfect sequence. The training ground was completely silent. Lucky guess, Zektar said, but his voice sounded less confident. Second test. Hand-to-hand combat. A large alien guard stepped forward. He was the same species as Commander Zektar, but even bigger. His arms were thick with muscle and his claws looked very sharp. Pete walked to the center of the combat circle. Without showing any fear, the alien guard was twice his size and probably 3 times as strong. Begin, Zektar shouted. The alien guard rushed at Pete with his claws extended. Jake was sure Pete would be torn apart, but Pete was not there when the guard reached him. Somehow, Pete had moved to the side so smoothly that it looked like he had just disappeared. The alien guard stumbled past him, confused. Pete did not attack back. He just stood calmly and waited. The guard tried again, this time more carefully. He swung his claws at Pete's head. Pete ducked under the swing and stepped behind the guard. Before the alien could turn around, Pete had grabbed his arm and twisted it in a way that made the guard fall to his knees. Pete let go and stepped back. The guard got up and tried one more time. This time Pete caught the guard's wrist, used his own momentum against him, and gently but firmly put him on the ground. The alien guard stayed down, breathing hard. Pete helped him up and patted his shoulder in a friendly way. Good effort, he said. Commander Zektar's mouth was open. All around the training ground, aliens and humans stared at Pete in amazement. Jake felt pride fill his chest. This was what his grandfather must have been like. This was what a real human soldier could do. After Pete's demonstration, nobody in the training ground moved or spoke. Commander Zektar stared at Pete with his mouth open. Alien guards looked at each other with confused expressions. All the recruits, both human and alien, watched Pete with new respect. Finally, a deep voice broke the silence. There'll be enough. Everyone turned to see General Mortax walking across the training ground. The general was the highest-ranking officer at the academy. He was taller than Commander Zektar, and his scales were darker and more scarred. When he spoke, everyone listened. Commander Zektar dismissed the recruits. General Mortax ordered. Yes, sir, Zektar said quickly. All recruits return to your quarters immediately. As the recruits started to leave, Jake caught Pete's eye. Pete gave him a small nod that meant everything would be okay. But Jake was worried. What would happen to Pete now that everyone knew he was not just a mechanic? Jake walked slowly back to the human quarters with Lisa and the other recruits. Everyone was talking about what they had just seen. Did you see how fast he moved? One recruit said. And that weapon assembly, said another. I've never seen anything like it. Lisa walked next to Jake. You knew, didn't you? She said quietly. You knew he was more than a mechanic. Jake nodded. He told me yesterday. He served with my grandfather. Your grandfather really was a special soldier then. Yeah, Jake said, feeling proud. He really was. Meanwhile, in the training ground, General Mortax stood facing Pete. Commander Zektar and 2 other officers stood nearby. What is your real name? Mortax asked. Pete stood straight and tall. Lieutenant Colonel Peter Sullivan, Earth. Special Operations Command, retired. Commander Zektar made a sound of surprise. Lieutenant Colonel was a high rank, much higher than his own rank of commander. And your mission here? General Mortax continued. To observe the training of human recruits and ensure they receive fair treatment according to galactic military standards. You have been spying on us. Pete shook his head. I have been doing my job. Earth's government wanted to make sure our young people were being trained properly, not abused. General Mortax walked around Pete slowly. The Horizon Guard, he said suddenly. Pete's eyes showed surprise for just a moment. You know about the Horizon Guard? We know about many things. Colonel Sullivan, we know that Earth prepared for galactic contact long before your official first contact. We know about the crashed ships, the intercepted communications, the secret military units. Pete said nothing, but Jake could see from the window of his sleeping room that the conversation was serious. General DXE continued. What we did not know was that Earth was still sending observers to monitor our training programs. Earth wants to maintain good relations with the galactic community, Pete said. But we also want to protect our people. Commander Zektar stepped forward. Sir, this human has been interfering with training. He's been helping the human recruits perform better. General Mortax looked at Commander Zektar with cold eyes. And why would that be a problem, Commander? Are you not supposed to help all recruits perform better? Zektar's scales turned a lighter color, which Jake had learned meant embarrassment. Yes, sir, but you have been treating the human recruits as inferior rather than training them properly. General Mortax's voice was very calm, which made it more frightening. You struck a recruit for mentioning his grandfather's military service. You have been using training methods designed to break their spirit rather than build their skills. Zektar looked down at his feet. The humans seemed weak, sir. The humans seemed weak because you were not training them correctly, Pete said. Every species has different strengths. A good trainer finds those strengths and builds on them. General Mortax nodded. Colonel Sullivan, I have a proposition for you. Pete waited. Stay here as a training consultant. Work with our instructors to develop better training methods for human recruits. Help us understand how to bring out the best in your species. Pete thought for a moment, and Commander Zektar. Commander Zektar will be reassigned to duties more suitable to his talents, the general said. Zektar looked even more embarrassed. I accept, Pete said. The next morning, Jake and the other human recruits were surprised to see Pete wearing a military uniform instead of his mechanic clothes. He stood next to General Mortax as the general addressed all the recruits. From today forward, Colonel Sullivan will be assisting with human recruit training, the general announced. He will work with our instructors to ensure all species receive appropriate training for their abilities. Jake felt excited and proud. Pete caught his eye and winked. Over the following weeks, training changed completely. Pete taught the alien instructors about human psychology and physical capabilities. He showed them how to modify weapons and equipment to work better with human hands. Most importantly, he taught them that humans were not weak, just different. Jake's performance improved dramatically. With proper instruction and equipment designed for his body type, he could hit targets as accurately as any alien recruit. Hand-to-hand combat improved when Pete taught him techniques that used human speed and flexibility against alien strength. The other human recruits improved just as much. Lisa became excellent with long-range weapons. Another recruit named Danny became very good at tactical planning. All of them gained confidence as they learned they could be real soldiers. One evening, Jake sat with Pete in what used to be the maintenance bay, but was now Pete's office. My grandfather would be proud, Jake said, looking at his improved training scores. He would be proud of you, Jake, but he would also be proud that his legacy is continuing. Jake looked at the old photo of his grandfather and Pete with the other Horizon Guard soldiers. Will you tell me more stories about him? I'll tell you everything, Pete said. Frank Morrison was not just a good soldier. He was a good man who believed that humans had a place among the stars. He trained soldiers not just to fight, but to represent humanity with honor. Jake put the photo back in his pocket. I want to do that too. You already are, Jake. Every day you train hard and treat others with respect, you honor your grandfather's memory. As Jake left Pete's office, he felt different than he had when he first arrived at the academy. He was no longer the weak human recruit who got slapped for talking about his grandfather. He was Frank Morrison's grandson, trained by his grandfather's old friend. carrying on a tradition of human excellence that reached back to Earth and forward to the stars. Outside, the alien recruits who used to laugh at the humans now trained, alongside them as equals. Jake smiled as he watched Lisa help a young alien recruit with his weapon stance. This was what his grandfather had dreamed of when he joined the Horizon Guard. Humans and aliens working together, each species contributing their own strengths to make everyone better. The legacy lived on,